السلام عليكم. أنا الطالب ركان حداد من كلية الطب في الجامعة الأردنية. Today I'm going to be explaining the third lecture of Neoplasia. Now, first of all, let's talk about the epidemiology of cancer. There's been a global increase in cancer incidence, and that's what the World Health Organization, the WHO, they reported 14.1 million new cancer cases worldwide in 2012. Now, as a result, they've been having projections for 2035, an estimate of 24 million new cases, in addition to significant deaths due to cancer. This is terrible news. But hopefully, with further studying and with further knowledge on cancer, we will be able to stop all that. Now, environmental factors. They are key risk factors for common cancers. We must understand that we care about the environmental factors or the environmental exposure because it appears to be the dominant risk factor for many cancers, okay? It is the reason that many cancers develop. So if we stop the exposure to specific environmental factors, we can stop the cancer spread in a specific type. Yani we can stop مثلا lung cancer. No, maybe not stop it, maybe like lower the amounts of people with lung cancer if they stop smoking مثلا, okay? So we need to focus on these environmental exposures, and controlling them can actually prevent specific types of cancers. Not all cancers, just specific types. Now, the first risk factor is going to be smoking. This is not a surprise. Smoking is really bad. It can actually cause various cancers like lung cancers, bladder cancer, oral cancers. It's actually, we must understand that 90% of the lung cancer cases are actually because of smoking. And smokers are more susceptible to lung cancer than anyone else in the world. Tobacco smoke is a carcinogen. It has carcinogenic substances and that damage the DNA and that promote cancer cell growth, and we'll understand that more next lecture. Alcohol consumption is basically just consuming alcohol, which gets metabolized to a toxic material called acetaldehyde. We learned about that in metabolism. And acetaldehyde is a carcinogen itself, so the accumulation of it can cause specific cancers. Some cancers are oropharyngeal cancer, esophageal cancer, and liver cancers. We must understand that alcohol is an independent risk factor, which means it can work by itself. It doesn't need anything else to be coupled with. يعني مش والله you have to drink alcohol and do something else to get cancer. No, drinking alcohol alone is enough to develop cancers. Diet. The way that someone eats, the type of food that is eaten, actually affects cancers. Basically, it can either increase or decrease the risk of cancer. If someone is eating healthy, of course, he's not going to have a large risk of developing cancer. If someone is eating unhealthy, someone is eating processed meats or whatever sorts of sweets, مثلا too much sugars, too much sweets, he's going to end up having cancer, okay? So a high consumption of processed meat is linked to colorectal cancer. بينما a diet in fruits and vegetables actually has antioxidants and anti-inflammatory properties that are protective towards cancer. So they protect you from cancer. Obesity is actually having excess body weight, okay? So excess body weight is a critical factor for developing several types of cancers, especially endometrial and breast cancers. An increase in it causes an increased amount of hormones like estrogen and insulin. Both of them develop the cancer cells. They cause the growth of the tumor. Infectious agents. Infectious agents can be viruses, can be bacteria, can be whatever. Okay, we learned about that while studying microbiology and while studying microbiology, bacteriology, and virology. Pathogens like viruses, like the human papilloma virus, HPV, hepatitis B and C, they're actually carcinogenic. In addition to some bacteria like Helicobacter pylori. We talked about those, so in microbiology, or I remember cytology when we studied the cancer biology of cancer cells. So human papilloma virus, the warts, they can cause cancers, okay? Hepatitis B, as we said, endometrial methane cancers. Hepatitis B and C can cause liver cancers. Bacteria like Helicobacter pylori can cause colorectal cancer, can cause whatever sort of different cancers. يعني. Approximately 15% of cancers worldwide are associated with infectious agents. Okay, so 15% of cancers worldwide are associated with infectious agents. Okay, so there is a great need for vaccinations and preventative measures. Okay, so as much as we can give vaccinations to people, lower the risk of being خلينا نحكي infected by specific viruses and bacteria, we actually prevent them from cancers as well. طبعا back in the day before they discovered that HPV can cause cancer, well, they did just things that we learned in community medicine actually. Just placing a specific hypothesis that HPV can cause cancer. Some doctors thought that this is a wild idea, this is a useless idea. Some others, and I cannot remember his name honestly, I believe it was a German scientist. I believe he was a German scientist, yeah. Anyways, he discovered that HPV is actually related to causing cancers like endometrial cancers. So it's really important to prevent against those these viral pathogens or bacteria, whatever. Geographic variations in death rates are significant. We must understand that the place where someone lives affects the risk of getting cancer, because if people live in industrial areas, they're going to be more susceptible to specific sorts of cancers because of the large amount of smokes and chemicals in that area. Okay? On the other hand, people who live in a land full of trees, maybe in a jungle or whatever, it's going to be filled with مثلا fruits, filled with fresh air, filled with everything good, then they would be less susceptible to developing a specific sort of cancer. Okay? مثلا, the death rates for breast cancer are considerably higher in the US and Europe compared to Japan. Okay? Largely attributed to variations in the lifestyle, the dietary habits, and environmental exposures. Everything we've talked about already. Now, let's learn some specific cancer rates, like the stomach carcinoma. The death rate from stomach cancer is 7 times higher in Japan than in the US. So we learned that in the US, breast cancer is more fatal than in Japan, مثلا. Okay? US and Europe. يعني. لكن stomach cancer, the death rate from stomach cancer is 7 times higher in Japan than in the US. Okay? So this definitely has to do with the dietary habits, because we're talking about stomach cancer. So the way that people eat affect خلينا نحكي their ability of developing cancer. Okay? So basically, people in Japan, مثلا, they include high salt intake and the prevalence of Helicobacter pylori, which is a carcinogen for gastric cancer. Okay, so that's why the people in Japan have 7 times greater in the death rates than in the U.S. This is mainly because of the dietary habits. Their dietary habits are really bad. They intake lots of salt and they have Helicobacter pylori bacteria, which is a known carcinogen for gastric cancers. Also, consumptions of pickled foods and soy sauce contributes to high risks. Pickled foods, the white material on a pickle, if you do not wash it, well, you should wash it, but if you do not, it's actually a carcinogen. It helps in the development of cancers. You have to wash it. Liver cell carcinoma. This is really rare in the US, but shows a high prevalence in many African and Asian populations. Okay, why is that? Due to the viral infections. Okay? حكينا يعني just link any sort of خلينا نحكي cancer rate, any sort of specific cancer rate to a pathogen, to habits, to whatever. So if we're talking about the stomach, it definitely has to do with either dietary habits or which is also considered dietary, having Helicobacter pylori bacteria, infected foods. Okay? Liver cell carcinoma, it has to do with the liver. What can cause liver cancer or liver cell carcinoma? حكينا وجود اللي هي hepatitis B or hepatitis C. People, especially Africans and Asians or African Asian populations, they have a high prevalence of liver cell carcinoma due to the hepatitis infection and exposure to aflatoxins found in contaminated food supplies. Hepatitis B and hepatitis C virus are the primary infectious agents linked to liver cancer. Hep B or Hep C. Okay, they're the primary infectious agents linked to liver cancer. When it comes to the diet, we're going to talk more about the diet here. Certain dietary factors significantly influence cancer risk. مثلا, High red meat consumption. It's actually linked to increased colorectal cancer because there are potential carcinogens formed during red meat cooking at high temperatures. Okay, so when you're cooking red meats at high temperatures, sometimes carcinogens can form. So intaking lots of red meat can actually cause the development of مثلا colorectal cancer. Low fiber intake, it's also associated with higher risks for colorectal cancer. Obesity, again, it's a significant risk factor linked to several cancers like the endometrial, breast, colon cancers, because there's an imbalance between the calorie intake and energy expenditure increase, which will cause the increase of body fat and hormonal changes. Again, the hormonal changes are going to help the growth of the cancer cells. لكن a balanced diet with fruits, vegetables, and grains, whole grains, is actually recommended for cancer prevention. These are foods that are rich in antioxidants and will help reduce inflammation, protect against cancer. It's really important to understand. يعني بكل بساطة, dietary habits are really important. You have to know what you're eating. You have to eat healthy. Okay? Eat healthy, you're going to become healthy. Now, again with smoking. Smoking is recognized as a major risk factor for various cancers, which are cancers of the mouth, pharynx, larynx, and esophagus. Okay? In addition to the lung cancer, the bladder cancer, some pancreatic cancers. Okay? So please memorize these, the mouth, pharynx, larynx, esophagus, in addition to memorizing the pancreatic cancer, bladder cancer, in addition to lung cancer. Okay? So, carcinogenic compounds in tobacco can lead to mutations in the normal cells of these areas. ليش؟ لأن tobacco is a carcinogen. شو بيعمل carcinogen؟ بيعمل mutation. Why does it cause a mutation? Because it ruins the DNA structure. Okay? It ruins the DNA structure. That's it. Okay? So, tobacco is a carcinogen. Carcinogen affects the DNA, causing mutations, causing cancers. That's it. Pancreatic cancer is actually a really dangerous type of cancer. It has high mortality rates, okay? So chronic inflammation from smoking may be a contributing factor to the pancreatic cancer. بينما bladder cancer incidence significantly rises with increased cigarette use. يعني if they did a study on people that smoke and people that don't smoke, bladder cancer would actually have higher incidence, okay, among smokers, okay? Carcinogens are going to be absorbed through the lungs and then they're going to be filtered by the kidneys into the urine. This will affect the bladder cells, okay? So the carcinogens that are absorbed throughout the lungs, they're going to be filtered by the kidneys, okay? This is normal. The kidney is going to filter stuff. لكن this time it's going to filter carcinogens. And so the body can get rid of them. It's going to send them into urine. The urine is basically enclosed within the bladder, so the bladder is going to be affected by those carcinogens. Again, 90% of lung cancer deaths are attributed to smoking, illustrating the critical need for tobacco control measures and cessation programs. And how can we stop and prevent smoking? Alcohol consumption, we know that alcohol intake is actually an independent risk factor. Then we already talked about that. طبعا زي ما حكينا انا دائما بحب فكره اني اعيد الشرح، يعني دائما بحب اني اعيد شغله معينه. So we're just repeating here really quickly just some more added information عشان ما يكون الموضوع اصعب بالنسبه لنا. ناخذ معلومات كلها دفعه واحده ولا لا على الترتيب بيكون دائما افضل يعني. So alcohol intake is an independent risk factor for several cancers, like the oropharynx and the larynx, يعني oral cancers مثلا. برضو, it causes increased risk of developing these cancers correlates with the quantity and duration of alcohol consumption. And alcohol can act as an irritant and a carcinogen, particularly in conjunction with tobacco use. The synergistic effect of alcohol and tobacco, we'll talk about that in a second. Okay? So alcohol itself is an independent risk factor. يعني لحاله, it being alone is enough for causing cancer. What types of cancer? Oropharynx cancer, larynx cancer, other types of cancers you see. Okay. برضو, we must understand that the duration and quantity of alcohol consumption can also affect the خلينا نحكي the risk of developing cancer. It increases them. يعني the more you drink, and for خلينا نحكي the duration, مثلا if you're drinking non-stop for a whole year, lots of amounts of alcohol, this is definitely going to cause specific cancers to develop. Okay, alcohol can act as an irritant and a carcinogen, particularly in conjunction with the tobacco use. Now, esophagus and liver cancers برضه من الالcohol. Okay? So chronic and heavy alcohol consumption is linked to a higher risk of developing these malignancies. We must understand that the liver is basically a purifier. It purifies, let's say it purifies blood from toxins, okay? It basically takes whatever toxins are in our body and basically purifies them, metabolizes them, okay? Now, when it keeps on using that alcohol, the liver cells themselves are going to get tired. Other than that, the accumulation of acetaldehyde is going to cause these carcinomas. زي ما حكينا, a carcinogen, accumulation of carcinogen causes more mutations which will end up causing cancer. Okay? Alcohol leads to liver cirrhosis, يعني cell death, يبلش الليفر نفسه يموت يعني, which significantly increases the risk for hepatocellular carcinoma. Long-term heavy alcohol consumption magnifies overall cancer risks dramatically and violates the body's ability to metabolize nutrients properly. Okay? So people who are drinking too much, they're going to actually have really bad ability to metabolize other substances, يعني not just alcohol. Your body is going to start not metabolizing normal foods that you're eating, or if you're taking medicine, it's not going to work anymore, and everything is going to get ruined. Okay, so alcohol is really bad and no one should drink. Okay, the synergistic effects of alcohol and tobacco. يعني there is some people they actually smoke and they drink at the same time, which is something that is really bad. So imagine that you're combining multiple carcinogens that will cause multiple mutations that will end up causing accumulation of mutations causing the cancer. Okay, these themselves, they affect the upper digestive and upper respiratory tract, obviously because upper respiratory tract because of the smoking and because of the alcohol, and the upper digestive tract because of the alcohol. Okay, so basically it creates a higher risk than just either substance alone. The interactive effects. Now we're going to actually focus on the reproductive history, which is also a type of environmental factor. The exposure to cumulative estrogen if unopposed with progesterone. What does this sentence mean? We know that estrogen in women actually causes the proliferation of the endometrium. Okay, so the cells would build up again. What if there is cumulative estrogen exposure or cumulative estrogen stimulation? This will cause the overgrowth of cells. What can stop it? Progesterone. That's why there is hormonal balance in the body. Estrogen is dominant for a while, and then after that, progesterone is dominant to stop the cellular proliferation. What happens is sometimes there can be an exposure to cumulative amounts of estrogen, and that amount is not going to be opposed with progesterone, so it's going to be unopposed with progesterone, particularly through hormonal treatments, early menstruation, and late menopause. This predisposes individuals to an increased risk of endometrial and breast cancers. Okay, so basically, if someone is having an exposure to cumulative amounts of estrogen, especially if it's unopposed with progesterone, because progesterone has a protective effect. It has the opposite effect of estrogen. Estrogen for proliferation, progesterone stops the proliferation. Okay, so if unopposed with progesterone, it's actually going to place the person in a higher risk of developing endometrial and breast cancers. Okay, so we must understand the reproductive factors. They're really crucial for assessing individuals' cancer risks. Okay, so prolonged exposure to estrogen can actually stimulate the growth of estrogen-sensitive tumors. Okay, this is really important to understand. Hormonal regulation is really important. Hormonal balance is really important. So any imbalances can actually cause risks for the development of cancers. Again, infectious agents, we already discussed that 15% of cancers are linked to infectious agents like HPV, hepatitis B and C, and Helicobacter pylori. Anyways, human papillomavirus, HPV, it's the major cause of cervical cancer and other anogenital cancers, particularly in the sexually active populations. Okay? Hepatitis B and C viruses, they are linked to liver cancer, particularly in populations with high prevalence rates of chronic infections. Helicobacter pylori, it's a bacteria, is associated with stomach cancer, gastric cancers, whatever, underscoring the need for effective treatment strategies in infected individuals. So this is HPV, human papillomavirus. This is hepatitis B. This is the Helicobacter pylori in the stomach. Okay. So this is not for memorization. Okay, not for memorization. This is just a diagram I took off of the internet just to show you how much smoking actually affects cancers. برضه في عندك excess body weight and alcohol, radiations, infections. Okay. زي ما حكينا مثلا 15% of cancers are from infections. هيها. Okay. تمام. اوكي نيجي على موضوع شوي سهل. Talking about age and cancer. يعني في اشي منطقي هون. مباشرة instantly you would actually tell me when a person grows older he has more خلينا نحكي he has more chance of developing cancer. I'll tell you yes, you're definitely correct, but why is that so? Why is it that a person when he grows older he has a higher risk of developing cancer? We talked about the accumulation of mutations. This is a really important thing. When mutations keep on accumulating over decades from whatever sort of environmental exposure, it's going to have actually a greater risk on cancer development on a person. We must understand that the highest cancer frequency is between 55 and 75 years of age. Okay, after 75, it's actually the rate starts to drop. Okay, زي كأنه it's not actually a normal distribution, but زي كأنه بيكون عندك cancer levels منخفضة until you reach 55 to 75 years old. يعني بيكون هيك عندك peak, then it starts to drop again. يعني let's say some sort of normal distribution. يعني obviously I'm not sure if it is or not. يعني but just a way of understanding what's happening between 55 and 75 years of age. A really high cancer frequency. Okay, after 75 the rate actually drops. Anyways, the reasons are due to the accumulation of mutations over the decades حكيناها, in addition to something that is really important, the immunity of the person. It actually starts to get lower. Okay, so decreased immunity competence with age, making older adults more susceptible to cancer developments and progression. Okay, because the immune system is able to detect and eliminate malignant cells. Okay, and that's it basically. Anyhow, does that mean that that it's impossible for children to develop cancer? No, children are actually really susceptible of developing cancer. 10% of the deaths in children are because of cancer for children under 15 years of age. What are the major cancers that can affect children? Most noticeably هم leukemias, central nervous system tumors, CNS tumors, lymphomas, and soft tissue sarcomas. Okay, these two lymphomas and soft tissue sarcomas are supposed to be in different points, but I got tired of writing, so yeah, whatever. Leukemias, they are the most common type of cancer in children. It actually requires aggressive treatment, and it's really difficult to treat. Recently, if you're interested in cancers and leukemias and whatnot, الخدمات الطبية الملكية, they have actually reached some sort of treatment using T cells for leukemias for a child. Allah يشفيها, hoping for the best of her. يعني inshallah it never comes back to her. Leukemia is a really bad disease, especially if it happens to children. يعني they're really weak and really feeble. They cannot take all that damage that's happening to them. So a great thanks to the شكر كبير للخدمات الطبية الملكية for their efforts and for always being خلينا نحكي keen for more knowledge and keen on helping people. So this is really amazing. يعني again, the CNS tumors, central nervous system tumors, represents a significant proportion of childhood cancers, with survival rates improving due to advances in treatment. Also, if you're interested, Dr. Mamoun Ahram had, if you check out his YouTube channel, one of his YouTube videos is about this research that he carried with some students about tumors in children and tumors in children. Really nice, really amazing. You should really watch it. Okay, lymphomas and soft tissue sarcomas. These cancers contribute heavily to pediatric cancer mortality rates. Okay, so we must understand cancer in children is possible. Yeah, it's not impossible. No, it's really possible. The most cancers that develop: leukemia, CNS tumors, lymphomas, and soft tissue sarcomas. Okay. What do we mean when we say familial cancers? شو يعني familial cancers? Whenever you're talking to someone, suddenly he tells you, "Oh, well, his grandma has cancer, and his مثلا aunt has cancer. You sit there and just try to understand what he just said. His grandma and his aunt. So his grandma and her daughter, his aunt, they both had cancer. Is there any sort of is there any sort of relationship between that? I'll tell you that there is. There is actually a really important factor that affects cancer development in people, which is genetics. Okay, cancer can be inherited from one to another. Okay, which is something that is really bad. Making people with relatives that have cancer, so they're going to be more susceptible to developing cancer as well, because genetically they technically have it. Okay, so familial types of common sporadic cancers include breast cancer, ovarian cancer, pancreatic and colorectal cancer. Most commonly طبعا breast cancer Strong hereditary links identified, especially with the BRCA gene mutations that predispose individuals to both breast and ovarian cancers. We learned about BRCA1 and 2 and their protective role in their protection against cancer. They protect us from cancer cells. Okay? And in breast cancer, there's a mutation in the BRCA gene. Okay? So basically, it's going to predispose individuals to breast and ovarian cancers. This is really dangerous. Ovarian cancer also, family history serves as a critical risk factor. Early detection is vital for improved outcomes. If a woman comes, she's really worried that she has ovarian cancers. Her mother had it, her grandma had it, and her great grandma had it as well. مصيبة استغفر الله العظيم okay. So basically, to try to prevent herself from getting that cancer, she's gonna have to detect it either early if it already occurred, or prevent it by other sort of treatments. Okay, so this is really important to understand that family history is a really important risk factor. Pancreatic and colorectal cancer. These types of cancers also demonstrate familial patterns, requiring genetic testing for at-risk family members. إذا ما فيش شيء صعب هون، ما فيش شيء بده شرح صراحة، بس we talked about familial cancers, some 3 types: breast, ovarian, pancreatic, and colorectal. Breast cancers, because of strong hereditary links that have been identified, the BRCA gene gets mutated. Ovarian cancers, which actually really it's highly affected by family history. Pancreatic or colorectal cancer that also showed familial patterns, so you'd have to do genetic testing عشان تشوف to check if anyone's at risk or whatever. Okay? طيب. Alright, then we're going to learn about characteristics of familial cancers. They include the early onset of conditions, multiple occurrences within family members, multiple or bilateral tumors. This is really self-explanatory. Early onset of conditions, the conditions of a tumor are going to start earlier than usual in someone without a familial history. Multiple occurrences, multiple people within the family are going to be affected. Then multiple or bilateral tumors. Genetic markers in familial cancers, you must understand that a specific marker phenotype may be absent. What do we mean by that? If there's a specific mutation in a gene, let's say the BRCA gene 1 or 2, the BRCA gene, we must understand that we may not be able to identify that mutation early. Okay, or that mutation may not yet be identified. We cannot identify it, or we just generally cannot identify it. Okay, so the phenotypes may be absent. You must understand that for siblings, the relative risk, the RR, of developing cancers is 2 to 3 times higher than the general population. People that are siblings have 2 or 3 times the chance of developing cancer than people with no familial cancer histories. And why is that so? Because siblings share the same, they kind of share the same genetics. Epigenetically, they're kind of similar. So these things really affect how someone could get cancer. Okay, so just memorize that siblings have 2 to 3 times higher than the general population a risk of developing cancer. Okay, and know that a specific marker phenotype is difficult to obtain. It may be absent. Okay, inheritance patterns. We must understand that the inheritance pattern is still ambiguous, which means it's still not completely known. Okay. There have been 2 suggestions. One of them being a dominant predisposition. it's often suggested, but a multifactorial inheritance involving environmental interactions is also plausible. Certain familial cancers can be linked to the inheritance of mutant genes. Okay? Now, what do we actually mean by a dominant predisposition? This basically means that a mutant gene from one parent is enough to develop cancer. زي لما تعلمنا اللي هي الوراثة اوكي بالتوجيه يعني بوحدة الوراثة. A dominant predisposition. One mutant gene is enough يعني from one parent is enough to cause the cancer. But also there is a multifactorial inheritance pattern or suggestion. Maybe خلينا نحكي someone being exposed to many environmental factors, epigenetic changes, also some mutations يعني this is also a plausible suggestion. Okay, لكن the most خلينا نحكي used suggestion اللي هي dominant predisposition, but there is a multifactorial inheritance حكينا this is also plausible. Certain familial cancers can be linked to the inheritance of mutant genes. Now, acquired cancer predisposing conditions. These include conditions associated with chronic inflammation, immunodeficiencies, and precursor lesions that can elevate the cancer risk significantly. Okay? So now what we're going to study here, يعني, they're just cancers that can be acquired and things that improve خلينا نحكي the chance of getting them. Okay? تمام? So cancers that are acquired from specific diseases. Okay? And these diseases actually improve the chance of someone developing cancer. Chronic inflammations, immunodeficiencies, and precursor lesions. Okay. Conditions like psoriasis or inflammatory bowel diseases can create an environment conducive to tumor formation. So we must understand that specific diseases can actually create a healthy environment for a tumor. Okay? Tumors and chronic inflammation. We must understand that they are mostly going to be carcinomas, but also can include a mesothelioma of lymphoma. Tumors may arise from chronic inflammatory processes. Okay, so tumors and chronic inflammation, they can arise from the inflammatory process itself. Individuals with immunodeficiencies, they actually face an increased risk. Increased risk of what? Of tumor development. طب ليش? When someone is immunodeficient, he's more susceptible for viruses and bacteria like the hepatitis B, C, HPV, like Helicobacter pylori. Okay, so he's actually under a virus-induced cancer risk. Okay, including lymphomas, carcinomas, and sarcoma-like lesions as well. Okay, طيب. What about precursor lesions? Lesions mean injuries, okay? So precursor lesions, we're talking about injuries that can act as a precursor for cancers or for tumors. Molecular analysis showed precursor lesions often possess some genetic lesions from associated cancers, okay? يعني they basically noticed that a specific lesion has genetic lesions from associated cancers. They're kind of similar يعني. مثلا squamous metaplasia associated with increased lung cancer risks in smokers due to cellular changes stemming from the inflammation. Okay? The squamous metaplasia. What does metaplasia mean? We already talked about that when we learned the cell injury and cell injury and repair at the beginning of the semester يعني. We talked about the definition of metaplasia, how a tissue changes itself from one type to another. And one of the most important factors of that was smoking مثلا. Okay, smoking can change the epithelium, the columnar epithelium of the respiratory tract. I know, ciliated, goblet cells, whatever يعني. Pseudostratified, not what I care about right now. It changes it into a squamous tissue. A squamous tissue is going to be more able to, it's going to make you more viable for infections, برضو viral infections, bacterial infections, whatever يعني. And it's going to make a person more, خلينا نحكي, more viable to developing a specific cancer. So, squamous metaplasia is going to be associated with increased lung cancer risks, okay? So this specific injury, the precursor lesion, the squamous metaplasia, okay, it's actually associated genetically to lung cancers, okay? to generic lesions يعني. بس هي endometrial hyperplasia. Okay, what do we mean by hyperplasia? Increased amount of cells. Okay, not increasing in the size like hypertrophy. I'm talking here about hyperplasia, increased amount of cells, increased proliferation. Okay, considered a precursor to endometrial carcinoma. Okay, so this lesion or this injury, endometrial hyperplasia, can cause endometrial carcinomas. Okay, why? Because of the unopposed estrogenic stimulation. يعني estrogen is being secreted and stimulating everything, causing cellular proliferation without being اللي هي opposed. Okay, so unopposed estrogenic stimulation. Okay, like قبل شوي when we said if unopposed with progesterone stimulation, progesterone is going to actually oppose the effect of estrogen. هون بنحكي estrogen is being unopposedly stimulated, يعني there's nothing opposing it. That's it. Okay. Leukoplasia, it's actually associated with precancerous changes leading to squamous cell carcinoma risk, especially in smokers. Okay, يعني بتصير بالoral cavity, the vulva, and the genitals يعني, let's say. Okay. Villus adenoma. What is that? It's a condition that poses a heightened risk for progression to colorectal carcinoma, highlighting the importance of surveillance and potential surgical intervention. Okay, so we have precursor lesions. We have 4 precursor lesions: squamous, endometrial, leukoplasia, and villus adenoma. Okay, squamous metaplasia is related to lung cancer. Endometrial hyperplasia is linked to endometrial carcinoma. Leukoplasia is linked with squamous cell carcinoma. A villus adenoma, it has to do with colorectal carcinoma. Okay, so in general we have to highlight the importance of surveillance and surgical intervention towards these lesions. Okay, طيب. طبعا when it comes to these pathological conditions and associated neoplasms, we're gonna find more details in the table below, which is here. Okay. Anyways, alcoholism and mutations frequently lead to pancreatic carcinoma through multifaceted mechanisms, including genetic susceptibilities and disruptions in normal cellular repair processes. And برضو, alcoholism can cause pancreatic cancer. مين كمان? Smoking. Environmental versus genetic factors, a discussion on the balance between inherited traits and acquired factors, يعني genetically inherited, environmental اللي هم acquired, in conferring risk for cancer is crucial in understanding individual susceptibilities. يعني if I want to study how susceptible a person is to develop cancer, I need to study his exposures to the environment. Is he always smoking? Is he always drinking? Is he always dealing with chemicals, radiation? Or is he genetically susceptible? يعني does he have familial cancers? Lifestyle choices, environmental exposure, you can read, that's not really important. يعني whatever you do in your life affects change their susceptibility of getting cancer. يعني. Pathological condition, asbestosis or silicosis, the associated neoplasm اللي هي mesothelioma اللي هي lung carcinoma. Okay, etiologic agent, asbestos fibers, silica particles. يعني من اسمها asbestosis, it's caused by asbestos fibers. Silicosis by silica particles. Okay, النيوبلازمز لوين بصيروا؟ mesothelioma, lung carcinoma. Inflammatory bowel disease. Okay, can you please guess the neoplasm if I'm talking about bowel diseases? Oh, colorectal carcinoma, it was so difficult to guess. Yeah. Okay, lichen sclerosis, vulvar squamous cell carcinoma, pancreatitis, pancreatic carcinoma. So we're just studying some pathological conditions that can be inflammations, can be chronic inflammations, whatever. In general, that can develop into neoplasms or into malignancies. يعني. Chronic cholecystitis, okay? Cholecystitis, gallbladder cancer, okay? طبعا by bile acids, bacteria, gallbladder stones, it can all cause that. Reflux, esophageal, you can read the rest, you have to memorize them. يعني, okay, it's not really that difficult يعني, if you can link it. يعني, hepatitis, the pathological condition, أكيد من hepatitis B or C, it's going to cause liver cell carcinoma مثلا or hepatocellular carcinoma. بس يعني osteomyelitis, bone, so يعني ما في شيء كتير صعب. Chronic cervicitis and cervical carcinoma يعني from HPV, okay? Anyways, here we're going to also study some inherited predisposition, autosomal dominant cancer syndromes, and autosomal recessive syndromes of the defective DNA repair. So here, when it comes to autosomal and dominant cancer syndromes, the retinoblastoma gene, the RB gene, is actually really susceptible for mutations. Lee-Fraumeni syndrome, various tumors, لكن one of them اللي هي TP53 tumor suppressor gene بالخاصة TP53. It's the most susceptible gene for خلينا نحكي for mutations, which will be explained next lecture. Melanoma, CDKN2A, okay? Familial adenomatous polyposis واللي هي colon cancer, APC gene, okay? Neurofibromatosis 1 and 2, NF1, NF2. يعني just some genes بدك تفهم انه بدك تفهم الكانسر syndrome مع الجين تاعها ايش يعني ايش الجين that gets mutated, okay? So if I tell you والله melanoma على السريع CDKN2A gene gets mutated. Breast and ovarian tumors BRCA1, 2 او برشا 1 برشا 2. Okay, whatever يعني it's really easy. Same here. Xeroderma pigmentosum, diverse genes involved in nucleotide excision repair. So there's a problem in the nucleotide excision repair. So a problem happened in DNA. We need to fix the DNA by the nucleotide excision repair. That gene gets mutated, so the DNA would not get fixed aslan, okay? So this causes xeroderma pigmentosum, ataxia telangia. I really don't know how to read that, my bad. Ataxia telangiectasia, ATM, which we also learned in cytology. Bloom syndrome, BLM, yes, I still cannot read it, even though we took it like 100 million times. Fanconi anemia, diverse genes involved in the repair of DNA crosslinks. So يعرفوا فرقوا بين xeroderma and pigmentosum and Fanconi anemia. Okay, now, cancer genes. They are genes that are affected by genetic aberrations or genetic changes in cancers, presumably because they contribute to its malignant behavior. Okay? Even cancer genes are genes that are affected by the cancer itself. And those genes themselves, they actually promote the malignant behavior of the tumor. They give the tumor its malignant behavior. عشان يسمونها cancer genes. Cancer يعني malignancy. Cancer gene يعني protein يعني function. فأي cancer gene يعني a cancer protein يعني a cancerous function, a malignant function. Okay. These genetic aberrations, they impact cancer genes. The causative mutations can be acquired, spontaneous, or inherited. Prompting attention to genetic testing and family history. طبعا acquired لما نحكي احنا كلمة acquired can be acquired by radiation, chemicals, viruses, whatever يعني sort of thing that a person can acquire a genetic aberration that impacts the cancer genes. Understanding the genetic changes can actually help us reach therapy, okay? We can use targeted therapies. We can target specific genes and basically disable them then, or whatever we can do to them, try to fix them, okay? So we must understand that the causative mutations can be acquired, spontaneous, or inherited. Acquired because of radiation, chemicals, viruses. Spontaneous يعني انت وحظك, okay? Inherited يعني it has to do with familial cancers. Functional classes of cancer genes. رح نتعلم هلا كمان جين هدول if mutated can become cancerous. Oncogenes لحالهم they are cancerous, okay? لما انت تسمع oncogenes they are cancerous. In the body they're present in what's called a proto-oncogene like RAS مثلا, okay? Which we also learn in cytology. Anyways, oncogenes, dominant genes as one allele mutation is enough to produce the pro-oncogenic effect. Okay, so oncogenes, they're kind of really dangerous because if you think about it, one allele of the gene can get mutated and it will cause the pro-oncogenic effect. So it's responsible for driving uncontrolled cell growth. Okay, they drive uncontrolled cell growth. Often exhibit dominant mutations that alter normal cell functions. Dominant mutations يعني إنه one allele can produce pro-oncogenic effect. Okay. Basically it will induce a transformed phenotype. يعني راح تعمل إشي جديد. هذا الإشي it's going to help cancer to grow. Oncogenes are basically mutated or overexpressed versions of normal genes that are called proto-oncogenes. إذن Proto-oncogenes, they are normal genes in the body, and they can be mutated or overexpressed. This mutation or overexpression causes them to become oncogenes. So oncogenes have either transcription factors so they can keep on replicating, or they have survival factors so that they stay alive longer. They can have both, who knows. Tumor suppressor gene. من اسمه tumor suppressor gene. It suppresses the growth of the tumor. So basically it serves to prevent the uncontrolled growth. إذا في إحنا أشياء عندنا بالجسم, there are protective measures in the body. لكن sometimes they can exhibit mutations. With that, recessive mutations. شو يعني recessive? متنحي. يعني they have, يعني if a gene has two alleles, both of them have to be mutated. Okay? So it will cause an increased cancer risk if mutated. تمام? Mutations in both alleles allow the transformed phenotype to develop. Tumor suppressor genes, TSG, are two types. مين هم? Governors and guardians. Okay? هم governors و guardians. الجوفرنر شو بيعمل؟ it stops او break, يعني بتدعس على البريك for cellular proliferation. بيدعس بريك على cellular proliferation. بيقول لا chill, you're proliferating way too much. Okay? I wrote it wrong. I wrote proliferation. مشوها خلاص. Two, اللي هم الguardians, they sense genomic damage. Okay? So, and as a result, they can initiate damage control response, which will either end the proliferation of a cell, or if the damage is too great, I will induce apoptosis for the cell. Okay? So, governors, which will break or give a break on cellular proliferation, will guardians that will sense the damage. Okay, when they sense the damage, they either end the proliferation or induce apoptosis depending on the damage. Too much damage, I will cause apoptosis. Apoptosis regulating genes. Okay, they are genes that regulate apoptosis. They allow healthy cells in our bodies to stay alive, and they kill the bad cells in our body, cells that can probably become cancers. Okay, so alterations in their expression are common in cancerous states, resulting in unchecked cell survival and proliferation. يعني apoptosis regulating genes, they will go to a specific cell, let's say it's a cancerous cell, they will kill it. Okay? لكن if the mutation had occurred to the apoptosis regulating genes, they will not be able to detect the cancer. Okay? They won't be able to detect it, allowing it to keep on growing. Okay? So these genes are going to be overexpressed in cancer cells because they protect against apoptosis. Okay? مين هم apoptosis regulating genes? Okay? So they're really important. What do? They cause they cause the survival of the cancer. Okay? Apoptosis regulating genes. So instead of regulating in the way that we would want them to do, they would not actually regulate it. They will only just allow cellular survival. Okay? عشان هيك those genes, they're going to be overexpressed in cancer cells. Okay? Because they're going to protect against apoptosis. Genes that promote apoptosis, on the other hand, are going to be underexpressed in cancer cells or inactivated by mutations. أنا لما أجي أكتب when I'm typing, يعني بدل ما أكتب the letter N يعني I write the letter M. يعني, okay, so أنا كاتب M cancer cells or it's inactivated. Okay, so the genes that will promote apoptosis are underexpressed in cancer cells or inactivated by mutations. Okay, so it's really important to know that alterations in their expression are common in cancer states. مين هم apoptosis regulating genes? Okay, apoptosis regulating genes, basically they prevent the apoptosis. خلينا نحكي. Okay, that's why they're going to be overexpressed in cancer cells لما تكون بالحالة اللي هي preventing apoptosis. لكن what about the genes promoting apoptosis? They're going to be underexpressed in cancer cells and activated by mutations or whatever. Genetic lesions in cancers, اللي هي genetic injuries. شو يعني genetic injury؟ يعني an injury that hits a gene. شو هو الجين؟ الجين هو عبارة عن letters. Yes, the gene is basically letters. Whatever. So T, C, A, T, G, C, A. The gene is basically just letters. A genetic lesion is actually a change of a single nucleotide mutation, maybe nucleotide base pair, okay, or it can be a chromosomal abnormality. كيف يعني chromosomal abnormality؟ يعني the whole chromosome, a part of it might get deleted عادي. Okay, but يعني the whole idea is that when we're talking about genetic lesions and genetic injuries, they're gonna most likely cause cancer, يعني specifically accumulations of them. ولما نحكي genetic lesions, I'm talking about إيش؟ I'm talking about mutations. Okay. So genetic lesions in cancers, genetic lesions can involve changes from single nucleotide mutations to larger chromosomal abnormalities. يعني that genetic injury can either be just in والله single nucleotide صار لها mutation, أو it became really large to the point that there have been a chromosomal abnormality. شكل الكروموسوم كله تغير مثلا. Okay. Many specific neoplasms, they exhibit non-random genetic changes that can be targeted for therapy. They're non-random. يعني the cancer actually, or the tumors, they know what they're doing. Okay? The genetic changes that they do, they're actually studied. مدروسات خلاص, they know I'm going to affect this gene, so it's not actually random. Okay? That's why we can target it by specific sorts of therapies. Okay? The driver versus the passenger mutation. شو يعني? Driver mutation, they directly affect and contribute to cancer gene function. Okay, so they have a central role in the tumor progression, usually are acquired but can be inherited. And the mutations, they cluster tightly within cancer genes. Okay, إذا شو يعني driver mutation؟ هي عبارة عن mutation, it directly affects the cancer gene function. Okay, it directly affects the cancer gene function. And it has a central role in the tumor progression. طب how can someone get it? By it's usually acquired, لكن it might be inherited. Okay, and the mutations are gonna always be clustered tightly within the cancer gene. يعني بتطلع الجين كل المutations بيكونوا really tightly clustered next to each other, جنب بعض بيكونوا. بينما passenger mutations, they do not really impact or significantly impact the behavior or tumor growth, but they may arise as byproducts of genomic instability. Okay, so هون نحكيهم acquired mutations that occur randomly. طبعا هلا حكينا they occur non-random. شو اللي كنا نحكي عنه؟ we were talking about genetic damage that causes cancer. هون حكينا a passenger mutation isn't really significant for tumor growth or whatever. Okay, so عادي يعني يكون random. Okay, so هم acquired and random. Example, carcinogen exposure in melanoma, smoking related lung cancer. يعني هذول passenger mutations. Okay, so these mutations, they do not significantly impact the cellular behavior or tumor growth, but may arise as byproducts of genomic instability. Now let's study the types of mutations, وإن شاء الله ما ضلش إشي, يعني هي كانت أطول lecture. Point mutations. إيش يعني point mutations؟ I affected خلينا نحكي nucleotide base pair instantly. Okay, هات خلينا نشوف كيف. These alterations can significantly impact protein function, activating or inactivating it. Usually it's going to be activation إذا صارت للبروتو-oncogene. So if I have a proto-oncogene, okay, POG, this proto-oncogene إذا صار لها point mutation, a mutation to a specific nucleotide base pair, point mutation, okay, شو اللي راح يصير؟ It's going to cause the activation of proteins. Okay, the proteins are going to become activated. تمام. We're also going to observe the point mutations among various cancer types. A really important example is the RAS gene changing to a cancer. طبعا RAS is a proto-oncogene, changing to a cancer gene by a point mutation, which is one of the most common. Okay, one of the most common types of mutations are point mutations. وبرضه RAS gene to be affected by the mutation is one of the most common types. Okay, في tumor suppressor gene point mutations TP53 حكينا قبل شوي. This gene is the most frequently affected in various cancers. Okay, we must understand that the TP53 is the most frequently affected in various cancers. It plays a crucial role in regulating the cell cycle and apoptosis, thus acting as a guardian of the genome. تمام؟ إذا بكل بساطة البوينت mutations هم alterations that impact the protein activity. إما بيعملوا له activation or inactivation. When do they activate it? The majority of times when there is a proto-oncogene and it gets point mutated. Okay? أعطيني example of point mutation, the RAS gene, one of the most common. اوكي. برضه في tumor suppressor gene like the TP53 ممكن يصير لها point mutation. This gene is most frequently affected in various cancers. يعني when I'm studying any sort of cancer, usually the خلينا نحكي the most affected gene is going to be the tumor suppressor gene, خاصة TP53, the most important. Okay, has a crucial role in regulating the cell cycle and apoptosis. في any mutation in it يعطيك العافية. Okay, so yeah. Gene rearrangements. شو يعني gene rearrangements? Actually causing translocations or inversions that are particularly significant in specific cancers. Okay? شو اللي عم بصير with gene rearrangements؟ هاي مثلا this is a chromosome. Okay? مش عارف ليش هيك رسمته يعني كل الرسمات ورحت رسمتها. This is a chromosome مثلا. This is a specific gene that's called gene A, and this is another chromosome. Okay? Let's say that this is chromosome مثلا 8 and this is chromosome مثلا 12 or 14 or whatever. يعني اللي بصير شو اللي عملته؟ اوكي راح الرسمه كلها يعطيك العافيه. اوكي اذا شو قاعد بعمل انا؟ هاي عندك كروموسوم، عندك كروموسوم ثاني. You have a specific gene, let's call this gene A. بيقدر لحاله it can actually go and translocate itself on another chromosome, so it will be lost from this area but it will be added here as a new part. So you عندك chromosome A transported itself there. This is actually and it can cause various types of cancers like leukemias and sarcomas, and it will lead to inappropriate gene expression and contributing to oncogenesis. Okay, ليش؟ لأنه the gene went to a completely different place now. It's not where it belongs. Gene expression is changed. Everything is changed. طيب, it can activate the gene rearrangements can activate proto-oncogenes in two ways. أول way, gene rearrangements and proto-oncogenes. تاني واحدة, fusion genes. Okay? أول واحدة اللي هي rearrangement. Rearrangements can lead to the overexpression of proto-oncogenes by removing them from the normal regulatory elements and then replacing them under inappropriate highly active promoter or enhancer. شو اللي بصير? As I said, I have these two chromosomes. عندك gene A. This gene here is being regulated properly. It's being regulated. Okay? والregulation تاعها هي slow. Okay? So regulated slowly. هذا when rearrangement occurs لما ينتقل لهون. هون there is hyperactivity حبيت. There is hyperactivity here. Okay? الهايبر هون it will cause the overexpression. هذا اللي كنت احكي overexpression. نسيت الكلمة يا زلمة. Overexpression of the gene A. Okay? Of gene A. When gene A is overexpressed, this is basically gonna cause specific types of cancer وهون بنسميها gene rearrangement. Okay? Gene rearrangement and proto-oncogenes. Okay? So this is the first way يعني. For instance, خلينا ناخذ examples. Burkitt's lymphoma. بدنا نحفظ هلا. Burkitt's lymphoma. It often involves rearranged MYC genes على chromosome 8 to rearrange itself to chromosome 14, which drives cancer development by promoting proliferation in lymphocytes. Plus, في مثال تاني, follicular lymphoma, a reciprocal translocation between chromosome 14 and 18 leads to overexpression of the anti-apoptotic gene BCL2 on chromosome 18. حلوين. إذا شوفي في عندك مرضين. واحد اسمه Burkitt's lymphoma. هذا في عندك MYC gene وبتصير rearrangement من chromosome 8 to chromosome 14. It's going to cause overexpression or خلينا نحكي it's going to drive the cancer development وبصير في proliferation وين بالlymphocytes. الثانية follicular lymphoma. اوكي عندك reciprocal translocation. ايش الكروموسومز 14 and 18, and it's going to lead to overexpression of the anti-apoptotic gene BCL2 on chromosome 18. حلوين. Fusion genes fusion genes oncogenic rearrangements can create fusion genes. شو يعني fusion genes? two genes صاروا ملتصقين ببعض. اوكي two genes صاروا ملتصقين ببعض. يا حبيبي شو اللي صار؟ اوكي بعرف شو اللي صار صراحة. اوكي تمام. So Fusion genes, oncogenic rearrangements can create fusion genes encoding novel chimeric proteins. Okay, like the Philadelphia chromosome associated with chronic myeloid leukemia, CML, chronic myeloid leukemia. ايش الكروموسوم؟ Philadelphia chromosome, PH chromosome. Okay, Philadelphia chromosome, PH chromosome, associated with chronic myeloid leukemia. طيب, serving as important biomarkers for diagnosis and targeted therapy. Balanced reciprocal translocation between chromosome 9 and 22. Okay, إذا راح يصير في translocation بين ال two chromosomes. What will happen؟ في عندك على الكروموسوم 9 CHR9 ABL oncogene راح يرتبط مع البي سي ار، نفس الشيء راح يرتبط مع البي سي ار جين اللي وين؟ اللي على chromosome 22. Okay, so the ABL BCR hybrid gene is gonna cause growth بس بهاي السلالة كلها. Okay, so ABL oncogene على الكروموسوم 9 والبي سي ار على الكروموسوم 22 يصير في عندك fusion. This will cause a hybrid gene. وشو يعني hybrid gene؟ يعني overgrowth. Okay, hyperactivity of growth, cellular proliferation, increased cellular proliferation. Okay, هي fusion genes. بكل بساطة gene fuses with another gene causes growth. بس والله هي. وخدنا على الفيلادلفيا chromosome, PH chromosome, which is really important to understand chronic myeloid leukemia. Okay. ايش يعني genetic deletions؟ طبعا حكينا احنا عندك point mutations, rearrangements, deletions, amplifications and aneuploidy. طبعا قربنا نخلص ما ضل شيء. اوكي. Genetic deletions, I delete a specific region of the chromosome. يعني I'm deleting lots of genes. And usually when you do that, you're gonna end up removing the tumor suppressor gene. Okay, or part of it. يعني ممكن كلها ممكن part of it. The loss of tumor suppressor genes such as the retinoblastoma gene, okay, can lead to unregulated cell growth and development of malignancies, escalating the risk of tumor development. Also, deletion is associated with the loss of the TP53. Okay, so basically you must understand that there's huge risk of deletion of genes. When you delete a gene, you have a risk of deleting a tumor suppressor gene alongside it, which will end up promoting cancer growth. Gene amplifications. ايش يعني amplification؟ يعني overexpression and protein hyperactivity. Okay, حكينا متى البروتين بصير active when a mutation occurs to a proto-oncogene, so it can be amplified. متى؟ overexpression protein hyperactivity, which results in their conversion to oncogenes. Okay, so proto-oncogenes are going to be overexpressed, mutated, have high protein activity. They're going to turn into oncogenes. Prominent examples are NMYC in 20 to 35% of neuroblastoma and the HER2 of neuroblastoma, and the HER2 اللي هو نفسه طبعا HER2 is for breast cancer نفسه ERBB2 يعني نفس الاسم HER2 له اسم تاني ERBB2. Okay, in 20% of breast cancers, both of which are critical targets for therapeutic intervention, allowing for tailored treatment options. يعني tailored treatment options يعني I'm able to come up with a treatment specifically for that gene because I know that it's affecting this proto-oncogene which became an oncogene يعني. Okay, so حكينا neuroblastoma and breast cancers. Okay, إذا gene amplification يعني صار في overexpression and hyperactivity of proteins. Aneuploidy refers to abnormal chromosome numbers. Okay, so بطل في a multiple of the haploid state اللي هي 23 chromosomes. Okay, this is actually really common in carcinomas. These chromosomal abnormalities can influence oncogene and tumor suppressor gene counts. بيقدر يتغير عدد الجينز. Okay, contributing significantly to tumorigenesis and cancer progression. Okay, so ايش يعني aneuploidy؟ now that aneuploidy means abnormal amount of chromosome numbers. بطل في عندك haploid state, not a multiple يعني of the haploid state, 23 chromosomes. Okay, so the chromosomal abnormalities can influence the oncogene and the tumor suppressor gene counts, contributing significantly to tumorigenesis and cancer progression. Aneuploidy tends to increase the copy number of key oncogenes, okay, and it decreases the potent tumor suppressors. This is really logical. We just said that it influences the amount of oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. What can cancer do to an oncogene? Increase it because it wants to become more cancerous. So what can it do to something that kills it? It's going to lower it. It's going to lower the tumor suppressor gene. Okay. The examples, chromosome 8 carrying MYC oncogene is present in increased copies in tumor cells. Okay? And the oncogene is going to be present more in tumor cells. Portions of chromosome 17 carrying the TP53 gene are going to be lost in tumor cells, okay? That's the whole point of aneuploidy. And no, I'm increasing the amount of oncogenes and decreasing the amounts of tumor suppressor genes. The presence of aneuploidy is often associated with worse prognosis in various cancers, reflecting an unstable genome during the tumor evolution. Yani if aneuploidy is present, the cancer is probably at a worse stage, okay? Here we have the Burkitt's lymphoma. The gene here, okay, the MYC gene here was translocated يعني translocated to the chromosome 14. عملت البركيتس lymphoma. صار ال MYC gene أو الأونكوجين it became overexpressed, okay, فصار في more growth. بينما هون عندك الفيوجن جين، اوكي، هون عندك هي فكرة الفيوجن جين انه ABL oncogene it fused مع ال BCR locus which caused the activation of growth factors and whatever يعني. This is really easy يعني. We just talked about all of that. Okay, good luck doctor. بدنا نعرف انه عدلت شوي على الاسئله اللي انتبهت فيه يعني مش خلينا نحكي اغلاط يعني inaccuracies بسيطه. What types of genetic lesions are commonly found in cancers? بدك تعرف انه in genetic lesions you would find point mutations and chromosomal abnormalities. What reproductive history factor increases the risk of endometrial and breast cancers? The unopposed estrogen exposure حكيناها. What are the two functional classes of tumor suppressor genes اللي هم ال governors and guardians? What are driver mutations in the context of cancer genetics? They are basically mutation mutation only effect. They are the mutations that alter cancer genes and contribute to cancer development. At what age do most cancers, 55 to 75? What role do chronic inflammation and immunodeficiency play? We must understand that chronic inflammation promotes tumor formation. Immunodeficiencies increase virus-induced cancers. How can gene rearrangement lead to cancer? طبعا اشوف هون gene directly. Okay, gene rearrangements can create fusion genes and they can activate the proto-oncogenes. Okay, so D. What environmental factors are considered dominant risk factors for many common cancers? طبعا smoking and radiation صحيحة, air pollution وhazard صحيحة, genetic predisposition and lifestyle choices برضو صحيحة. لكن the strongest answer here is A, and honestly this question يعني I wanted to remove it بس تعجزت صراحة just whatever. They all work to be honest يعني, so just forget this question. بس يعني A is the strongest يعني. What characteristics define familial cancers? Early age at onset and multiple tumors. What percentage of cancers worldwide اللي هي by infectious agents? 15%. What is the relationship between asbestos exposure and certain neoplasms? Skin cancer, liver cancer. Asbestos exposure increases the risk of mesothelioma and the lung carcinoma. What is the role of the MYC oncogene in Burkitt's lymphoma? It basically promotes cell proliferation. What is the Philadelphia chromosome? It's basically, and what condition is it associated with? It's in chronic myeloid leukemia. وبس يعطيكم العافية، أتمنى تكون عجبتكم المحاضرة. هي كانت الأمانة شوي محاضرة زنخة، هي أطول محاضرة، لكن إن شاء الله القادم أسهل وأفضل.